Hi, my name is Cassandra Bullis. I am one of the three individuals who will be discussing through this presentation about the teenage brain, more specifically, why adolescence feels so intense during this time. Now, adolescence is a significant event during many of our lives where we are slowly but surely preparing for adulthood, whether that be physically, mentally, or emotionally. This is specifically true for our brains, as the developmental phase of the brain is different compared to children's and adults because it marks the beginning of the developmental of the hippocampus and the hormonal changes. This causes teenagers to develop an increase in behavioral and emotional response and attitudes compared to other ages. And because of this, many adolescent individuals tend to experience more negative emotions and are at risk of developing mental health issues, according to Stefano. Moreover, it's essential to study the developmental phase of the enactment of certain emotional and behavioral reactions based on the brain's emotional regulation process to develop a deeper understanding of the adolescent mind and to assist adolescents by providing care and support for those in need of therapeutic guidance. How does the brain actually change? Well, the brain development through adolescence is demonstrated through the neuroscientific research that the emotional regulation of the brain can be chalked up to numerous different things. One, the intensification regarding the social affecting process, which is caused by the engagement of the subcortical brain region through the bottom up, mainly the amygdala, and two, the post development of the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for the top down emotional regulation, which, mind you, doesn't develop until much later, specifically after the development of other areas of the brain, according to Stefano. The development of the brain also includes the process of myelination, which is the process of inserting a substance called myelin, which strengthens the peripheral and the central nervous system, and the synaptic pruning, which is involved in the strengthening of the brain's pruning, according to Barrow. But for today's presentation, we want to mainly focus on the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, as they are the primary functions of developing emotional regulation. Now, in terms of emotional regulation, adolescents are very known for being very expressive when it comes to their emotions. Sometimes it can be the usual intense positive feelings, such as joy or excitement. The majority of the time, teenagers express more negative emotions, such as frustration, embarrassment, stress, exhaustion, etc. You get the point. Well, don't we all experience intense emotions during any ages of our lives? Yes. However, with adolescence, it's a bit different. You see, during the developmental process of the brain, it has been stated that the process of the incoordination between the maturation of the bottom up and the regulation of the top down regulation is somewhat disrupting the interplay of the emotional processing and regulation regions of the brain, according to Krishnan. The amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are two of the big games when it comes to emotional regulation and why it's specifically different in terms of process compared to other ages, which is why it's specifically important that in order to understand the emotional process within the teenage brain, we need to primarily focus on the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex of the brain.
Adolescence is characterized by a sequence of developmental events precipitated by changes in cerebral structure and changes in concentration of hormones. The main areas of the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and mesolimbic reward systems mature in a certain sequence, which in turn influences the behavior, unpredictability, and heightened emotional response that occurs in this stage of life. The amygdala is a core part of the limbic system and plays an essential role in processing stimuli of emotional relevance, including fear, threat perceptions, and social interactions. Additionally, it has earlier maturation compared to the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function, inhibitory processes, and future thinking. Spirit 2000. Developmental delay leads to neurobiology imbalance that defines an age of transition marked by heightened emotional reactivity that is poorly regulated through available checks and balances. Steinberg 2010. Using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, studies have shown that adolescents had an amygdala activation in response to emotionally provocative context is common, especially in relations within one's peer group, where adolescents can often show overt displays of provoked aggression, social fear, and loss of self-control. Blakemore 2008. At the same time, the dorsolateral and ventromedial regions of the prefrontal cortex undergo extensive synaptic pruning and increased myelination that increases their functional effectiveness. However, these developmental processes in adolescence shift towards a period of functional immaturity, Spirit 2000, Blakemore and Mills 2014. These extended processes in adolescence impact adolescents' capacity for risk examination, prediction of outcome, and emotional regulation, while facing emotional stimuli or social pressure from their peers. A third system undergoes striking changes, the dopaminergic reward system, which primarily includes the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area. Of all systems, it has shown to be the most sensitive to dopamine during adolescence. Increased sensitivity heightens reward perception and promotes immediate gratification, motivated behavior. Burns et al. 2009. Reward system activity is increased, elevated risk takes at its basis, adds a tendency for experiencing new things, and increased sensitivity towards influence from same age peers. The effect is strongest when social acceptance is viewed as a reward, Steinberg 2010. In experimental conditions in laboratories, activation of reward system regions in the brain can significantly increase the participation aspect involving peers. The increase in activation is irrespective of external reward. Thus, it clarifies neurobiology underlying influence by peers and responsiveness in social context. Burns et al. 2009. With respect to reward processing, social context dependency can clarify emotional response to peer evaluation and peer-based social hierarchies. Responses in adolescence are marked by significantly larger amplitude. Interaction between immature regulatory processes in the prefrontal cortex, heights in activity in the limbic system, and response to reward-sensitive hormones creates a neural substrate that predisposes towards impulsive acts, emotional liability, and involvement in socially high-risk behaviors. These traits are not reflective of deficits, but rather manifestation of an optimally adapted brain for experience-seeking, social interaction, exploration during the pivotal development period in an evolutionary context.
Hi, I'm Tanvi. Now that we've explored how the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and the reward system develop through adolescence, let's zoom out and look at what all this means in real life. As we've seen, the amygdala, which processes emotional stimuli and threat perception, develops early. This makes teens more reactive to emotional and social triggers, especially from peers. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of decision making, impulse control, and logical reasoning, matures much later. This developmental mismatch means teenagers aren't being irrational or dramatic, they're still learning to regulate their emotions while their brain is rapidly rewiring. So, instead of reacting with frustration or judgment, adults must shift how they respond. For example, when a teenager shuts down or lashes out, it's not because they're being bad. Their emotional brain is simply overpowering their logical brain. Psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Siegel, author of The Whole Brain Child, explains that in those moments, what teens need most is calm, validation, and connection. Even small changes, like keeping a consistent sleep routine, limiting screen time before bed, or building downtime into the day, help make the environment more predictable, which reduces emotional overload. And if parents need help, there are free resources like the Raising Children Network, which offers evidence-based strategies, and Parentline NSW, which provides counseling and scripts for hard conversations. Teachers also play a huge role. Risk-taking or zoning out in class isn't always defiance. It's often because their emotions are in overdrive and their thinking brain hasn't fully developed yet. Psychologist Lawrence Steenberg highlights how teens are most likely to act before thinking, not because they want to misbehave, but because their brains are still learning how to pause. Teachers can support this by integrating reflective tools like journaling or scenario-based discussions, helping teens practice emotional regulation in a safe place. Free programs like Reach Out Schools and mindfulness apps like Smiling Mind give educators accessible ways to build resilience into daily learning. And of course, teenagers themselves aren't powerless. Once they understand why they feel overwhelmed, they can start to respond more thoughtfully. CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, emphasizes that simple strategies like deep breathing, mindful walking, and journaling can help teens manage their emotions and build self-awareness. Teens can also take back control by setting boundaries, like stepping away from toxic friendships or turning off notifications when they feel anxious. And when things get heavy, platforms like Headspace and Kids Helpline offer 24/7 mental health support, counseling, and even breathing tools, all for free. Most schools also have well-being teams. Students just need to know that it's okay to reach out. So what's the key takeaway? The teenage brain isn't broken, it's building. And when we understand how the amygdala and prefrontal cortex interact, we can stop treating adolescence like a problem to fix and start supporting it like the growth process it is. Whether you're a parent, teacher, or teen, we all have a part to play in creating environments that support this brain development. Luckily, no one has to figure it out alone. If we meet teens where they are, emotionally and neurologically, we can turn what looks like chaos into a chance for real connection, growth, and resilience. Thank you.